Sky Squad, we are back in the building. And yes, we are going to be breaking down the latest in reality TV and pop culture news and entertainment. And we're going to be breaking it down like only we can. Also, today we are introducing our membership portal where you guys can get extra content. Now, the charter members of this membership portal will be able to get a lifelong discount. So be sure to tap into the links in the description of this video or audio, wherever you may be listening to this. And if you haven't gotten the tea on my new book, The Wickedest Wives of Vicious Reality, it's available on Amazon.com right now. Now let's dive in. Sky Squad, we are back in the building, and look who we have here. We have Preston Mitchum from, well, you guys know him from Summer House, Martha's Vineyard, but we in the DC streets.
Look.
Listen, I ran into Preston, I think, what was it, like 3 weeks ago at this point? Was it 3 weeks
Yeah,
ago? Yeah.
that was a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Out and about in DC, like I'm rarely out. And so I'm super happy that we ran into each other the way that we did, because it was the perfect way to kind of like segue into doing this. And hopefully we can do more
Mhm.
things together. But Preston, outside of Martha's Vineyard, because you have a whole life that exists beyond the show, can we talk about like just, we know that there was a commonality, being frat brothers with Silas. But
Mhm.
just can you talk to us about your background and just like how did you get to that space where you actually met Silas and
Yeah.
Jasmine, and what were you doing before Summer House?
Yeah. So, oh my God, what wasn't I doing before? It's so funny because I feel like I'll be doing too much at all times. No, but like even like leading up to Summer House Martha's Vineyard, in short, I was an attorney. Did a bunch of work related to activism. Most of my work has tended to be on like the gamut of what most people can call like the progressive issues. So most of my work was on abortion access law and policy or contraceptive equity. Did a ton of work on employment discrimination for LGBTQ and Black folks. And then I was also teaching at both Georgetown University Law Center and American University, Washington College of Law. And funny enough, when I went to school at Kent State University in Ohio, we did not have, actually, we didn't have a lot of the Divine Nine, if I'm being honest. We were a really big school, but like 30,000 students, but we had maybe half of the Divine Nine. And one of them that we did not have was alphas. And so, I had already made my mind. I was like, I know who I want to be. I know which organization I want to dedicate my life to. And so that became an opportunity for me when I moved to DC a little bit later down the line when I felt like I really had my feet planted. And ironically, so that is when I met Silas. We were both interested in the alumni chapter. And it's funny though, because I don't even think I realized how small the world was or is. Silas was actually a law student at Georgetown University Law Center, and I was a professor at the same law school. So I didn't have him for class, didn't even know him as a student. But I think like when we got the opportunity to really like meet each other and talk to each other, I'm like, wait, where do you go to school? So I think we realized just how small the world was then. But that's really kind of how him and I start building a relationship naturally through our chapter. And then stayed in touch as he moved to New York and as I stayed in DC. So
Mhm.
that's a little bit about some of the work that I did. I think in DC, a lot of people really know me for my activism. I mean, there's a very popular, less popular now, but popular gay sports bar, Nelly's, where I've been protesting probably against them for like 8 years now, long before there was this big news story around this Black woman who was dragged down the stairs
Oh,
by her hair. I've
I
been protesting against them years before that, because yeah. So a lot of people really knew me as like that person who was in the streets, literally and figuratively. So it's always been a good time to be in DC, to be honest, for me.
yeah, that ooh, Nelly's. I could
Mm.
I'm
I
not
used
I'm
to
not
have some good moments too. That's how I'm like, oh my god.
exactly, like, that for people who don't know, like, that was, like, for me at least, I had a friend that performed there,
Mhm.
For me, it was like that's a big part of my history in DC. So,
Same.
and I
Mhm.
don't know that people who are outside of the space of DC really understand what Nelly's was, what
Mhm.
it is today, what it
Mhm.
could be.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying, and there's a lot more to that, and that would be an entirely different that's
Oh
an
my
episode
gosh.
in and of itself. Okay, like we could
Yes.
go down that road, but I want to
Mhm.
stray away from that rabbit hole real quick. I want to just in terms of I would love to get your thoughts on this, and and I don't want to turn this into a political thing, but just because of your
Yeah.
activism, I mean, I would love for you to just kind of like express to people the importance of like voting this year, and
Mm.
not only in just the general like election for president, but I think people miss the
Yeah.
opportunity to vote in the local elections as well. And I just want you to just
Yeah.
touch on that for like the importance of that real quick, just because I
Yeah.
feel like I can say it to my community, but I feel like I think it's a little different when they hear from somebody who's working.
Yeah, and I do wanna say, because I, in many ways, understand, I don't agree, but I understand many people who are like, "My vote clearly does not matter," right? They'll because it oftentimes happens that someone will vote for someone who many people said would bring a promised change. They haven't personally felt that promise changed, and so because of that, they believe that voting for X just doesn't matter anymore, and I would say they are absolutely wrong, right? I think sometimes, unfortunately, we look at voting as just the general election for the president, and we miss so many opportunities when we're not discussing that as well as your local and state elections. Like, even thinking about roads, right? Like the things that you're driving on that you complain about, and you're like, oh my, why are there so many potholes? Well, a lot of who controls that are actually local elected officials who
Mhm.
specifically have administrative agencies locally that provide funding for roads. You're upset that the schools in these areas are bad. Well, you know why? Well, your local electeds actually have many administrative agencies that control the budgets for elementary, middle, and high schools, right? Like there are so many things that are connected to voting that people don't, I think, realistically know, right? A lot of the information, in my opinion, are just is the lack of that. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of miseducation that happens, and locally, statewide, and nationally. And even if you want to just say the role of the president is more or less a figurehead, you still want a competent figurehead, right? Like you still don't want an incompetent, like convicted felon, 34 counts to be this figurehead because that sets an example for the entire country. I think ultimately, right, like I always, especially as a lawyer, like I tell people, like if you're complaining to me about the Clarence Thomases of the world, the Litos of the world, recognizing that the next president will likely get a chance to appoint a couple more Supreme Court justices. Like, and then you're saying at the same sentence you're not voting, it's hard for me to listen, right? Because the truth of the matter is, like, the president controls, right? The president nominates, the Senate confirms, but we really need people who are, again, competent, who are going to speak to your issues, right? And the presidency is never going to be a perfect role, right? Like, you're automatically giving up a lot of things, unfortunately, to make space for other things. But rest assured, and I just want to be very specific, Biden and Trump are objectively different, right? Like, this is not the lesser of two evils. There's an objective difference in their policy and their practices. And that's true. Even when I disagree with some of the things that Biden has done in office, I'm still like, he's objectively different than someone like Trump. And
Yeah.
I really hope people take voting very seriously. And if not, we only have ourselves to blame. And, sometimes people are okay with that. And if that's the fight you want to make, cool. But we really do need to encourage people to vote and not shame people, right? All the way through the election, because the problem is most people only discuss voting when it's time to vote. And that is how we find ourselves here every time.
Yep. Yep. I really just wanted you to express to people how important it is, especially in this period of time. And because of your
Hmm.
work, I feel like it may hit different coming just from me because I can say, I am going to vote. I did vote as an
Hmm.
example, but I think to hear the reasons why specifically, especially from somebody who works in the space that you work in, is
Yeah.
super important.
Thank
Um,
you.
I would also love to hear some misconceptions that you
Hmm.
feel like because before the show, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. When I thought of Martha's Vineyard, I thought, I thought of white people. Like, I mean, listen,
Yeah, right.
you
Right.
know, that's really what I thought of, and it was always a place that I felt like I wanted to go, but and I
Right.
don't always go to just places where I feel like black people are frequenting.
Right.
I'm going where I want to go. But what are
Right.
some misconceptions that you feel like you hear a lot about Martha's Vineyard that maybe even the show didn't touch on?
So one of the things, well, you just named one, is that it is, there's and I don't know if it's a misconception, if I'm being honest. Martha's Vineyard is still pretty white. Like that's not I don't think it's a mistruth or a non-truth.
Right.
I think though that the people really didn't know that in the summertime how black it was or is specifically. Like if you go other times of the year, frankly, you will see a lot of white folks. You will also still see a lot of black folks, but there's something special about the summertime. And like that as much as possible, I think the show touched on some of the history that you could see related to why. But Martha's Vineyard is one of the first places that black people could buy property in the United States. And I think it's just such a powerful thing, right? Like I think that is a really beautiful thing, frankly. And I'm glad we were able to showcase that a little bit more. I think obviously one of the things that I think the show did not show enough of, frankly, was just how great the food is on the vineyard. Like the vineyard has such dynamic food, and I think because we would probably only go to like 5, 6 specific spaces, it was just kind of hard to. I mean, you're not really going to get all the pictures of the food, right? Like,
Right, right.
they did a good job getting what they could get in terms of like the oysters, lobster tails, like some of the main things on the vineyard. But when I tell you, the vineyard has such good food. There's a restaurant called the Atlantic that is so good. That oh my god, anytime I go, I'm like I have to go there kind of immediately to get my food. It's also just really beautiful. I think people could get that, but there's like such a rich history of like Inkwell Beach that
Yeah.
we discussed it season one, but again, because of timing, I really do wish we had an opportunity to showcase more of that. So those are just some of the few things I will say. Don't come to the vineyard expecting to turn up. Like you can certainly turn up maybe like in your house, right? But naturally, that's not why a lot of people go to the vineyard. Like it is actually a way to escape the like chaotic nature of the world around us. Many people go there because it is a place of like serenity and a place where you can kind of be at peace. A lot of writers go there to finish their books. Like it is certainly a place that provides a lot of focus. And a lot of, I don't know, like clarity of your mind. And so, you're not gonna find clubs open till 5 in the morning, right? So that's a so like reduce those expectations if you're looking for like a New York City nightlife. The vineyard is really a place to kind of escape a lot of that.
Okay, okay. What's the best time to go, like, during the summer? Like, if you had
Mm,
your ideal time, like, or ideal
mhm.
month or week, what would it be for those of us that have never.
Yes, 100%. So the best times, in my opinion, to go are 4th of July week
Okay,
and the first 2 weeks, or even the first 3 weeks of August. Those are usually because that is also pink. I mean, there's a lot of Divine Nine organizations that go every year, but it's a lot of like coordinated efforts from like cookouts to Pink Whale. The first 2 weeks of August, you have your African American Film Festival, which is really amazing. I'm actually a co-executive producer and consulting producer on a film that's actually happening this summer. So it's there's just a lot of things happening and a lot of things that I didn't know I had an interest in, and this has been an opportunity to explore it. But those are like the best two time periods to go.
okay, let me go back because you just teach me something
I
new.
didn't just drop that in there.
Let's talk movies
Yeah.
because that's you just sprinkled that up in there. Can you give us any
Mhm.
tea about that? Like, what's going
I
on?
can. So it's a short film called Home. A really good friend of mine, Julie Winna, is the director on it. And really it's around like honoring your matrilineal ancestry. And so a lot of the black women that were being filmed really just discuss a lot of their black women in their lives. So their mothers, grandmothers, sisters, etc. Who really touched on a lot and really provided a space of home for them. And the way they connected is that a lot of what the home within the home, if you will, was Martha's Vineyard for all those women. And so it's a really short film broken down into 3 parts that really discuss specific things along those 3 parts. And my friend Julie, she know I love the vineyard. She goes to the vineyard every year. and she's like, "Hey, I would really love to loop you into this. I just really appreciate your perspective, and I think like a lot of vineyard goers will too." And brought me in, and I can't wait. I can't wait for it to drop. I'm so proud of Julie, and that's my AKA sister, so I was even more excited for her to see everything happen.
When do you have details on when that drops? Like, so
Not yet.
okay,
Not yet. So we're hoping in August specifically, but still waiting for the official confirmation for it.
okay, okay. So, keep us up to date so
Absolutely.
we can promote and do what we need to do to support. I do want to get into how you sort of got casted for the show. Like, what was the
Mhm.
process behind? Like, and did you have any reservations about doing it?
Yeah. So you know what? This process was chaotic, and maybe this is the reality TV process for everyone. But I will say it was chaotic, yet felt really normal. In the sense of like though I had reservations, it just felt like this was divine timing. And so because of that, I'll say, some of us who were cast for the show, we were on the Vineyard. Now, I was not there with some of the people who are now on cast. I was there with another group of friends. But we were there around the same time period, and we were all separately going to this all white party. So who was at the picture that was posted ultimately was Jordan, Silas, Jasmine, Shanice, and Jason, who was in season one, and a few other friends as well. And then Jordan actually had posted this picture, and a casting director reached out to Jordan. Now, Jordan was already being vetted for another show at the time
Mm,
on Bravo. Didn't work out that season, but eventually she was on Winter House that next season. And after that, it kind of went off from there. Posted the picture, casting director reached out, so she kind of already knew it was legit because she knew the person.
yeah.
But then, communicate that information to, at the time, it was mostly Jasmine, Silas, and Shanice, trying to like see any interest or fillers out there. Funny enough, this casting director, he's very, he's very interesting. I love him dearly, but he does his job well. And by that I mean, after they said they were interested, he went to some of their friends list on Instagram
Oh,
and was like, "Oh, I wonder who else can be for the show." And then stumbled on. I had a picture at the time that was just a profile photo with me and an alpha jacket. So he was like, "Oh, who is this person? Do you think he would also be good?" And that's kind of how my name got looped into everything.
wow.
Um, and then he reached out to me. Of course, I was like, "This don't seem real. Like, who just finds someone on Instagram? Like, no shade. This is no tea, no shade to myself, but I am not like 6'3", chiseled body. Like, I'm not about to be the typical aesthetic for like, what you see on a lot of, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of reality TV shows." And so I was like, all right, whatever, ignored it. And then that's when Silas and Jasmine was like, "Hey, have you heard from this person?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have actually." So that's when I kind of knew it was legit and kind
Gotcha.
of followed that journey. I will say that I had many reservations, and I think most reservations, frankly. I think it's because I've watched reality TV for decades. And though this is not the same era of the, Flavor of Love, I Love New York's Charm Schools, which are my girls. Those are to me like the Holy Trinity. Uh, like I
Mhm.
still believe that there was something. You know how you never see yourself being represented on TV. I think for some people it becomes, well, it is sad, right? To not see yourself represented, to not see someone look like you, sound like you, etc. I think the way I took that for reality TV, at least, was that, well, maybe I'm just not good enough to be on reality TV, right? Like, if you don't see any of you being
Yeah.
represented, clearly there's a reason, because I'm sure it's many of us auditioning and interviewing. There's just something that may not seem entertaining or messy enough. And when you're queer, especially black and queer, I think, it's easy to be reduced to those caricatures and stereotypes.
Yep.
And I wasn't that, right? Like, and that's not to say I wasn't gonna be shady, because Lord knows I am. But I'm also many other things. And so I just don't think I've ever seen it done in a neat way or in a way that actually honors me or us.
Mm,
And it kind of, but I wrote a list. And on that list, even though the cons were longer than the pros, I think the pros outweighed the cons. The
mm.
biggest one being that, if not you, then who? It's not why. It's not now, then when, right? I think there was always a reason to push it back, to be like, now is not the time. But there was something so important to me about like being able to be on an ensemble cast on a network like Bravo as someone who could see themselves like
Yeah.
in me. And so when people see me every time I travel somewhere, the most beautiful statements are around specifically my father's death in season two. Like that really connected a lot with folks I hear. But I also think another one is people saying, like, I am so grateful that you were able to represent us well. And they were like, and by well, I mean you were just yourself, and I genuinely felt you were just yourself. And
Yeah.
that those mean a lot to me.
Did you feel any pressure? Like, I remember watching the first season, and I sort of felt like so there was this idea of Black excellence, and I know you had some
Hmm.
thoughts about that, but
Hmm.
I, it came across like, okay, this was going to be this elevated version of Black people. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Just because
Hmm.
there's this when you put that Black excellence
Right.
label, like there's a little bit of an expectation. I think. Did
100%.
you feel pressure from that
Yeah, you know what's
introduction?
interesting? Yes, and I think which is why I wanted to deflate it immediately, right? I don't care if it was gonna sound like a X and Twitter conversation. Like, I wanted to deflate it immediately because I know the feeling of when people even say things like Black excellence. It's hard to escape that, right? It's like, and I don't mean, yes, I do mean this in a shady way. But think about it, right? It's like if we're also going to be Black excellence, then how is it that most people don't know Arthur Ashe, right? Like for
Right.
me, it's like there's so much to live up to if you're already presenting this idea of Black excellence, right? And so like I struggle with it, like I struggle a lot with it, particularly when I know a lot of us on cast don't meet those standards. Like
Right.
not realistically, not based on those hashtags and everything else, right? And so it was like, wow, that's so fascinating to me how it's so easy to say, but hard to live up to, but somehow we still say it. Like it just didn't sit right with me, nor does it meet the expectations of most of our families,
Yeah.
right? Like it just didn't make sense to me. And so I wanted to deflate it immediately. Also because we're shooting like vodka out of a coffee mug. Like what? I like, so so a lot of it just I was like, what's happening right now? So, but but also, I've written articles on why I'm opposed to the phrasing of it and who can only be seen as such, like years before I came on the show.
Mm.
So it was like for me to let this go and not say anything. The people who actually know me in real life would have easily challenged me in a loving way, but it would have easily been like, "You didn't say anything. You didn't think to say anything," and I'm like, "Yeah, no." I will say, of course, as you very well know, everything won't make the edit, right? So clearly, there could be times, and there are several times where many of us say things that just don't. It doesn't fit into the storyline, right? Or it doesn't feel like it's so fit into what is curated. But there was a lot of pressure there, and I feel maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but I feel it nonetheless. I feel that I had the most pressure being placed on me, especially at the end of season one and going into season two. One as the black gay person in the house, but also because I was already named the person to hold everyone accountable. I was already named as the neutral person. I was already named as the emotional nucleus and center of the group, which means when you're all those things, all of y'all have the right to fuck up, right? The second, it seems like there is an opposition to something I'm saying when I finally state an opinion, when I finally say no to something, it's like, oh my God, what happened to the peacemaker? What happened to the neutral person? And it's something that no other cast member would ever have to experience or feel, right?
Mm.
But for some reason, as the only black gay person, you put it on me to do that and to do that kind of thinking for everyone. And so that is why the pressure kept building on me. And frankly, I was like, I'm not accepting it. You said I was neutral. I never said that. You said I was the peacemaker. I never claimed that. So, it started to get a
So
little
interesting.
frustrating. Yeah, it starts to get I honestly pitched a couple of websites about this too because I feel if I actually take a step back, it happens a lot to the sole gay person on shows. Like it is your job is to solve everyone else's problems, and how dare you care about your own?
Wow. And I have to reflect on my own viewing experience now, because
Yeah.
in my mind,
Mhm.
that was your role. Like,
Yeah.
and I think
Mhm.
I did that. Not
Yeah.
only
I mean,
because
to be fair, everyone does though. Like it's the one constant I noticed, and it really came to head, I think, a lot, particularly as me and Jordan's friendship grew, and how her and Jasmine's friendships kind of like
mm,
leveled. Right, like you never would see clips with me and Jordan ever discussing Jasmine, and for some reason people were like, "Oh, they're on the same side of this," and I'm like, "There's not been a single clip of this happening." Like, and I'm like, "You're making this up in your mind." And
mm,
so I had to like kind of realize that viewers have their own viewing experience, and it
yeah,
is not my job to like rebuff that, right? Like
yeah.
it's just,
Yep. Mhm.
we are sold, right? We are deciding to do this show where naturally people have their thoughts and feel. I as a reality TV watcher, I have many thoughts and feelings about folks on TV,
Yep.
and so I get it, right? It just comes with the territory, and as someone who's a little bit closer to 40, it's easy for me to handle. I think, unfortunately, I know it's not for many other folks.
I think also too that is probably why you came across the way that you came across in season one. And what I mean by that is an observer of chaos. Okay, like there's
Mhm.
chaos happening all around you, and you are the person there who is deciphering it. Because this is what
Yeah,
it felt like as a viewer, right? It felt like
yeah,
when we were introduced to the cast, Jasmine came across as a narrator. It
hmm,
felt to me like maybe she expressed the Black excellence idea and then almost sort of took it on. This
hmm,
is
hmm.
again, an observer's
There you
perspective,
go.
took it on, and maybe that maybe took some of the cast by surprise.
Hmm,
That she was, and maybe she felt pressure too, to be honest
hmm.
with you,
Right, right.
because
I'm sure. Hmm.
I'm sure there's some level of like, hey, we need you to tell this story in this way and make it
Right,
make sense, put it all together.
right.
Um, and so much is making sense as you're talking about this. And then you also just kind of come in from like the side, like there's a lot of there's a lot of chaos happening here. Like somebody
Hmm,
has to
hmm.
decipher it for us. You
Yeah,
became that person.
yeah. And I'm not, and I'll be honest, I'm not mad at it because I do think that's how I am in real life. Like
Yeah.
that's how my friends see me a lot. But I'm just like, if we ever disagree after a while, don't make my harm deeper than yours or anyone else's, just
Mm,
because this is the first time you've seen me committed, right? Or from your perspective, at least.
yep, yep.
And so it's hard to as an observer because that is what I tend to do a lot, particularly when I think something does not feel genuine.
Hmm.
That is for me when I start to distrust people and things.
Mm,
Because again, I've experienced a lot in my relatively short life, and I know immediately what my triggers are and what will cause me to like move away.
yep.
And me and my therapist have worked on this for years. But right, like my thing is I have made a commitment to myself to never re-traumatize myself. And
Mm,
so like whenever I feel if there is like energy or something that just feels like I don't know who this person is anymore, especially when cameras are at it, it immediately makes me go to the other side to connect with people who feel safe.
gotcha. Okay. I think you said a whole lot right there that
I
answers a
think you picked up
whole
on it. I think
lot.
you picked up on it.
And
Something. It just is what it is,
yeah,
right? And the one thing that I'm always going to center is my safety and well-being, and
gotcha.
that's just what it is.
Yeah. What do you feel like you learned, the biggest lesson that you took from season 1 into season 2, and now
Mm,
looking back, I think is like reflection and hindsight sort of being 2020. What was your biggest
mm.
takeaway from this experience thus far?
Wow, that's a great question, and one that I don't think I've actually ever been asked. Hmm. And this is really not to say this in a shady way. It's just a reminder of of the experience is to never let anyone dictate your friendships. That's
Mm,
just the one constant that I had to keep keeping in mind because there is this idea, and I've experienced this in the past, and I know many people have because we discussed it. There is this thinking for many people that the shorter your friendships, the worse they are, and the longer your friendships, the better that they have to be. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, that's not true for many people. I have many experiences where people who I've met in a shorter period in my life will likely be at my wedding more than people who I've known for a long period of time,
Hmm.
right? Because there's just like a level of trust you build, right? Especially when people show up at very critical moments in your life. And that is a thing I always have to think about. Like, right, like the dictation of my friendships will be between me and the person who I'm a friend with. No one else, no outside perspectives, no viewers' perspective in love. Like it just has to be like what I know I need. And that is really, I think, the biggest blessing that I've learned over these 2 seasons. And I think also just staying true to yourself, right? That sounds very like, of course, Preston. But I think many people change in different environments. And I think in some respect you have to survive. Black folks know that well. But I think realistically, if you find yourself actually like becoming a different person because you're entering into a different space, I really encourage people to really check that and remind themselves of who they are at all times. Because what allows me to do well, I think, on this series, and allowed me to do well in this series, I think, is that I was able to go to bed at night with no stress because I
Mm.
didn't have to think about whether I was changing. I didn't have to think about what
Yeah.
role I was going to play the next day. It was like, actually, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to take the food that I brought to my bed from last night off the side, put it in the kitchen, and start the day over. But yeah, but it was a really beautiful experience, right? And it is some disappointment of it being on pause. I also don't know if I disagree, if I'm being honest, with it being on pause currently. I think there are a lot of shifts that need to be made in order for longevity to be created for the series. Like we do, in my opinion, need more single people. We do, in my opinion, need longer than 2 weeks of filming, right? Like you need to get involved in our personal lives and you can actually see how our friendships are off the vineyard, if you will, even, right? Now, conversely, the vineyard is incredibly expensive. And
Mm.
so, some houses are a week $20,000 to rent. And so, yeah. And so it's like, well, how do you do that then? Right? Like all of us don't live in New York City. How do you do that? So it's I know everyone won't see it that way. I believe truly that if done correctly, this pause can be a blessing in disguise for us to work on our own individual projects, stay the course in doing more things in media and entertainment, should we want to do that. And frankly, figure out our own friendship dynamics, right? That some have been broken, right? And it's sad that that is the case over 2 years, right? And so I think there's a lot of reflecting that all of us should be doing.
Mm. Well, you also answered a whole lot of questions right there too. These be the interviews I love. Okay, I ain't even got to put it. You give it to
Look,
me
my
yourself.
gift, my gift and my curse, my gift and my
No, that makes great TV and it makes great interviews. Um, okay, so we know that you have movie coming out. What else do you have coming up next that
Mhm.
we can look
Oh
for?
my God. So the thing I'm most excited about is, I mean, it's Pride Month. I have always a loving and chaotic schedule in June, but I have a lot of travel this month. My dog is doing whatever she wants to do. I have a I have a lot of schedule coming up, or a lot of travel coming up from Frolic Weekend, where I'm hosting a couple of events. New York Pride. I'm getting an award at the end of June in Atlanta, Georgia on June 28th, which is a great honor. I think also aside from that, I am finally getting back into writing my book proposal, and that is the thing that I'm most excited for that. It's a really hard topic, and I think it's been hard for me to really sit and write and push
Yeah.
through, but I'm really looking forward to that. It's in short exploring Black queer men and boys and rape and sexual assault.
Ooh,
So a very personal book, but something I've just really haven't seen done,
yeah.
and done well, in my opinion, from some authors. So that is one exciting thing. Also, I have a hat partnership coming out this fall.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so get ready for all of it, like the kufis, the white brims, the fedoras, the more like creative ones, the really high ones. So it's like a whole editorial fashion shoot, a little avant garde. that are really happy to explore kind of my perspective of why I wear hats often, because there is a story to that.
Yeah.
That unfortunately didn't make the edit, but Jordan and I, for many who don't know, that's actually really how we connected. We both have hair conditions,
Yeah.
and it's just something that we really pride over quite a bit, frankly. But that's kind of in the journey and the story, and so I'm just really excited this fall when that launches, so people can really, so I can tell the story truly on my terms, without any edits or anything being adjusted to it. So I'm really, that's the thing I'm probably most excited about right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, listen, you always have a space here to promote, come through, let us know what you got going on. And,
Thank you.
I always got your back in terms of whatever you need.
Appreciate you.
We love you. We appreciate what you brought to the show, and I honestly cannot wait to see what you do next. So listen,
I'm excited. And I'm also glad my friend pointed you out a couple of weeks ago, because I wasn't facing you. And she was like, that's that's DJ Richie Scott. I was like, wait, who? And she's like, Richie Scott. I was like, oh wait, where? So that is just how I look. So people adore you, and I hope that you feel it too when you're in spaces.
you know what? I'm an introvert, so I be like off in
Right.
the corner, like
Uh-huh. And you were.
look in a dark
Meanwhile,
corner.
and I love it because meanwhile I'll be pussy popping in the middle of the floor. So I'll be like, it's so funny whenever I travel more now. So I just came back from Chicago, and I don't know if people expect you to change because you're on TV. I mean, I can imagine many people changing, frankly,
Yeah.
but I'm just like, y'all, I just love the streets too much to change. So I'm like, I don't know when that's gonna stop, frankly. But I'm just like, they're like, you're here, you're in the bar, like, yeah, it's a bar. Like,
Where else?
so maybe they expect me to be like only in fancy play. Like, I don't know, but I'm like, no, it's definitely me taking shots at the bar. That's me.
No, listen, and I think that's a testament to the fact that you just haven't changed. Like you are who you are, and what you see is what you get,
Mhm.
like it or not.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely,
what, to
absolutely.
me, that's what makes good reality TV. When people just show up and you get what you get.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing I appreciate when I talk to folks. They're like, "Oh wow, you are exactly how I thought you would be." The other potentially shady comment, but I know they mean well. If people see me, it's actually wild because people are like, "Wow, you look really great." I'm like, "You thought I was ugly?" Now, I know what they really mean is the camera doesn't do you justice, but it don't sound like it.
You know,
This man tagged me on something on Instagram, and I started cracking up because he was like, "Hey, y'all, I met my favorite reality TV person right now, Preston, and he looked good, y'all." I was like, "Thanks, appreciate it."
you know what? You gotta just charge it to the game. They be so excited. You know what I'm saying?
They
You know
do.
what I mean? Because they see
Mhm.
you're kind of in their home every week, right? So
Yeah,
it's kind of like surreal. And I
I
always have
love
to
it.
remember that myself. Like, these people might be
Mhm.
they might be watching you and they're seeing you and they're like, oh, I did it's certain things. Like most people don't realize that I'm like 6'3". I think a lot of people
Right.
think I'm like a little bit shorter, and I'm like,
Uh-huh. Yeah. And mine is the opposite. Some people think I'm taller than what I am. So I'm like, I don't know where you got that from, but because I definitely very much give 5'9.5". So I'm like, I take it, but I don't know where you got that height
listen, it's TV perspective and who you
from.
standing
Right.
around with. You know what I'm saying? So it's
Yep.
kind of difficult. Preston, let people know where they can follow you. I know it's on the screen, but if you have like any
Yeah,
websites
of
or anything
course.
like that, please let them know.
Absolutely. So my website is prestonmitchum.com actually, let me get prestonmitchum.com, period. But if you go /shop, I actually have some merchandise for
Okay.
viewers and listeners already. So a lot of it is quotes from Summer House Market's Vineyard. Some of it is some of my memes that became pretty famous this time around. So all of that is available. Also, because I run a small social impact consulting firm, I have a lot of my merchandise from my shop there too. But on Instagram and X, since I use apparently X now, it's Preston Mitchum or Preston.Mitchum. So feel free to reach out. I mean, I still be using Twitter for real, but
Oh, God. Listen, Twitter is like the wild, wild west. I stay away from it, okay?
woo, it is always going to be the place where dreams go to die. But I still, but you know what? Because I've been on Twitter for so long that I'm just like, I'm not giving it up. Like, I've been on Twitter for so long. Like, I've had tweets now on the Black Twitter documentary that just came out, which shocked me when people kept sending them to me. I was like, that tweet is from 2014.
Listen, Preston, God bless you. I can't.
No, you know what? So folks don't know this. A part of my journey was also I was, used to be a political commentator for Fox News, and so I used to be battling conservatives every day. And on I will never forget one of the episodes that made people incredibly angry. It was like around this Trump and Kanye West meeting, and of course, I was, tearing into both of them. And when I tell you, I got so many threats from white supremacists, like it was pretty wild. And I was teaching at Georgetown Law Center, and the police from Georgetown called me to see if I need any escorts because a couple people called the school to threaten me. And and I tell that story to say these little comments don't do nothing to me. So like, like yo, I'm sorry. I've been put on professor watch list. Like I
Oh my
whatever.
God.
Not threatening my life. And again, I make it a lighthearted joke about it, but it really is just to say I've been through a lot in my life. Where if the worst thing you can say about me is I'm a bad friend right now, baby, my friends in real life will tell you different, and I'm gonna move on. But you learn a lot about yourself, and I actually really, really love doing this, and pray prayerfully to continue in some either in this capacity or some other capacity. The traders holla at me next season. Look,
Oh, ooh.
look,
Oh, I can
listen,
see that. I
the
can
way
see
I
that.
want it so bad, like, I
Now,
can't
would
even
you
lie
want
to
to be
you.
a trader or a faithful?
I want to be a trader.
Yeah, that seems like that seems like the more interesting role.
Yeah, yeah. It just
'Cause
it requires. I mean, for faithfuls, it does require some strategy too, for sure. But I think
People
for
be
the trade, it
wilding
has to
out
require a
though.
lot of yeah. It requires a lot of strategy. So I'm really excited for season three because when the cast list drop, I'm like, oh, I really want to see how some of these people fare.
Same. I will definitely be tuning in.
Yes,
Um, Preston, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you.
of course. This was great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sky Squad, listen, we have Preston Mitchum here from Summer House Martha's Vineyard and all of the things that he has going on. Make sure you guys are following him. And of course, we will catch you all in the next